Did you have a crisis in your childhood? So often we recall painful memories and we don't really know what to do with them. Even if we feel better about them, how do we use them for God's glory? Our guest today is Vicki Ellis. She is the founder of Heritage Ranch in Zachary, Louisiana. God called her out of her broken heart to learn how to help others. When children go through crisis, families go through crisis. Her ministry, Heritage Ranch, now ministers to the whole family so they can live together in peace, in healing, and hopefully help others do the same. You are going to be so excited about today's episode of Life on Purpose TV. We have Vicki Ellis, who has founded a ministry that understands and helps children and families in crisis. She is the founder of Heritage Ranch. And you may wonder, how does someone start a ranch that helps children? Her story is all about the heart of a family in crisis. So let's go straight to, you come from a great family, you had a good solid upbringing, but you had something happen to you that forever changed your life and gave you a heart for kids that are in pain.
One of the biggest things that I felt like I had to tackle in life is helping people understand that trauma and crisis is not a bad family, good family issue. Right. It's just the nature of life. I was sexually abused when I was a child. It was by my grandfather, and my parents didn't have any knowledge of what was going on. When I was about 11 years old, I started to have flashbacks. I started to ask my parents questions about stuff that they just knew that I shouldn't know about. I think the alarm bells started to go off with my parents of like, something good isn't going on and something bad did happen or is happening.
Right.
And so I guess over the course of that period of time, I started to remember specifically that my grandfather had abused me, and that was when I was during my younger years, between like the ages of around 3 to 6 years old. I had every support that was possible to give, and even with all the support systems of a great family, my mom got me in counseling with a fantastic counselor here in town, had great church support, everything that you could possibly surround someone with in a crisis. I was still a wreck. I was crushed, I was vulnerable, and so from about 11 to 14 years old, I gotta admit, I was really angry and I was really emotional, and that caused a lot of stress with me and my dad, with my parents, because that has to come out somehow. When I was 14 years old, I'd say I was your pretty typical 14-year-old. It wasn't like a lot of people knew what had happened to me. I didn't talk about it publicly because it was just honestly a lot of shame around it at the time. So I think if anybody knew me from a public standpoint, I was a good student, pretty likable, talked a lot, same as today. The anger was mostly directed towards family. So I had this great family that I babysat for. They have 2 sets of twins, and I was 14 years old, and so that summer they called me. I did regular babysitting for them and said, hey, can you come and accompany us on a trip for a couple of weeks? We stopped at a children's home called Wears Valley Ranch. They were good friends with the founders, and at the time, the ranch, which is now thriving and successful, was actually in the process of being built. I'm with the actual founder. The man who God gave this vision, and his wife, and they're taking some good friends around. Honestly, I'm kind of just trailing behind, making sure the kids are not getting into too much trouble. And
I'm listening.
I'm listening. He told the story of feeling called to start a children's home for kids in crisis, and his specific focus was really more around kids who dealt more with abuse and neglect, and families that weren't as engaged. However, the parallels were so similar in terms of me understanding and thinking about, as he talked about it, what would it be like for a child in crisis to not only have gone through what I went through, but then what if they don't have the supports? And so I'm 14, I'll be honest, didn't make any grand plans. God planted a seed and I went back home and finished middle school. But after my freshman year in college, you know how God is. He just started stirring something. I was actually pre-med. After my freshman year, God kept just bringing back to mind, where's Valley Ranch? And I'm like, I don't know why you're doing that, but I just couldn't shake it. So I called the Adams family and I asked them kind of where was that in its process. And as it turned out, they had just opened their first boys and first girls home. So I applied for an internship. I was their first summer intern in their girls' house.
I bet that was an experience.
It was definitely an eye-opener. I mean, at the time, I think it was more just like obedience to the Lord, like there's something here and I feel like, hey, where can I go wrong? I'm gonna help kids in crisis. I have a passion for that, especially because it was girls. But I think it always stuck with me as I came back here and just went to, at this point, college. Oh, by the way, I did not decide I was going to start a children's home then. I was like, okay, God, that was like a really great experience. I did what you said, and I'm still going to be a neurosurgeon.
Well, how did that transition though? Because you ended up,
clearly,
you ended up with Eddie Staub
Right.
at Eagle Ranch, and he's telling you this is what it's going to take. So, what was the transition from neurosurgeon to okay, God?
I think I was about my third year in school, and I was pre-med, and I got an internship at the local children's hospital, which was an amazing internship, and it was fantastic. But the more time I spent in the actual surgery unit, there was just this thing in the back of my head that was like, there's something about that children's home thing that you're destined towards. I mean, I remember going to my internship, and there was nothing about the internship that wasn't good. I just didn't love it. Like, I would go to the hospital, and day after day I was like, this is not me. So once I realized I was not gonna be a neurosurgeon, I quickly changed from pre-med, because who wants to take pre-med classes for fun?
To not be pre-med,
Right.
to not be med.
So I did some research on social work, because I felt like, okay, if I'm gonna start a children's home, I have two routes to go. It's either get an MBA and learn how to run a business, or really learn the business of working with children and families. I shortly realized that if I was gonna start a children's home, I was not gonna be able to do this well if I didn't have a template. So I called Where's Valley Ranch, and they're like, look, you gotta call Eddie Staub at Eagle Ranch. He does something called a WING seminar. It's an actual 2-day replication seminar on how to start a children's home. So I went, and I remember still sitting in the room on the first day, and he handed us like a binder that was about this thick that had everything from like how to start a board to how to do a business plan. And I just looked at that and thought, I don't know how to do this. It was that moment sitting there at Eagle Ranch that I looked at it and thought, okay, this is where I give my full yes. And I'm gonna take all the wisdom that Eddie Staub and his team can offer about how to do this really well, and I'm going full bore back to the Baton Rouge area, and I'm gonna start a children's home, or I'm just gonna say no to God and I'm gonna go do whatever else I want.
Talk about coming back and taking that vision and really planting those seeds along the way, because you did all of them.
The one thing you can count on with God is that He will do what He says He's going to do, and He doesn't waver. And for me, fundamentally, since my relationship with the Lord is just the compass for everything that I do, and the belief that I'm called to be like He is, you know, that has to be part of who I am if I'm going to be authentically a follower of Him. So having my word, as what they would say, your word is your bond, and doing what we said we're going to do and following through on it, even when it wasn't easy, was just a non-negotiable for me, and it became a part of our DNA and our fabric.
So from when you put together your first board to when you opened that first boys' home.
It was a long time.
That was how many years?
Did I do the math right? 11 years.
You built a foundation before you built a building.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is so impressive.
You know, we did do about 5 years of school-based programming that was incredible. We worked with kids at several alternative schools, expelled youth, before we did the children's home. So we weren't in that 11 years not doing program work, but I will say, when we waited to find the right property that we could afford, when we chose not to open the doors of the facility, even though we had the property, but we couldn't do all the renovations and buildings without going into debt, there was so much pressure to just get open.
Because I think when people go into ministry, the temptation is to rush and assume God will catch up.
Yeah.
But the truth is, we're to wait on God. We don't expect Him to catch up. Let's talk about life in the home.
Sure.
And the house parents and how you work with the family, because you're not working just with the child. You're helping the parents. You're helping that whole system so they can go back home.
So for us, fundamentally, our mission is to work with families. And so while we are a children's home, that has resident males right now that come and reside and live on our campus, the entire family has to be involved. So that is our number one primary focus when we are sharing the services that we provide. So fundamentally, how our program works is that we serve currently boys ages 10 to 18 that are in some type of crisis. When a family calls us, they call us because they've exhausted every other resource.
They've tried everything.
They've typically tried counseling, they've tried family support, they've tried academic support at school. Everything they've tried isn't working. It sounds like, and this is the scenario we always encounter, it sounds like things have gotten to the point that the family is just absolutely in a tailspin. Right. Now, mom and dad, if there's a couple, or mom, if it's a single mom, or grandparents, they're burning out. They're distressed, there's tension. And when you have a 14-year-old or 11-year-old child that's so angry that they're failing school, they're lashing out, and I mean, it's real, maybe punching the walls to the point that they may be starting to get physically aggressive with you, and all they see, and I'll start crying because I always do, because I have right now a 13 and 11-year-old, and that could be me. Like when your kid is in that moment, you see your like 6-month-old, you see your 5-year-old, like you see those moments in their life, and that's your baby. I don't care that to the rest of the world, they may be the kid that's getting in trouble in class, right, that everybody else thinks is a bully. Anyone can think that, but when it's your kid, and you love your kid, and you've done everything you can, sometimes circumstances, often are, always circumstances are beyond our control. And so I get choked up about it because it's such a passion of mine, because that's the kind of families we serve. So when a family calls us and they go through the interview process, they have to be willing to come and drop their child off at a children's home with a husband and wife couple who are going to co-parent their kids, and they have to trust us, the staff, to raise their children for this period of time, right, along with them. Now, our boys go home every other weekend. Right. It's a huge fundamental part of our process that I think just gives comfort to the parents, because they're not abandoning their children. They're not leaving their children. They are co-partnering with us. Not only do we model family through our staff, because the boys live in a residential home, like a residential house. They do chores, they cook dinners, they do devotions. They live in the family home. They see that model every day, and they receive intensive counseling services. Our boys do group counseling almost every day in the house. They do individual counseling to work through whatever's going on. Their families come up and do counseling every week. And I don't just mean the parents, siblings.
So you're operating fully in the ranch. You've got the boys, you've got house parents, you've got rules. You have achieved your plan.
Right.
You're fully operational as according to what you planned.
Yeah, and debt-free.
And debt-free. And then the flood. So your house, personal house flooded because you live on the ranch. Yeah. The ranch flooded. You just said your church flooded, so it's like your whole world is all of a sudden underwater, and you've got to be at some point like, okay, God, this was not part of that plan.
Right, yeah.
I had all this planned, this did not fall. So how do you recover from something like that?
Just to give context, when we flooded, we were at the ranch, my family lived there, and then we had the house parent couple and the boys. So we all evacuated to a garage apartment above the main boys' home where we have support staff live. So praise Jesus, in the first place, we were all safe. So this flood was catastrophic. Our campus, which is 52 acres, got 4 feet of water. So all of our facilities, the boys' home, my home, our offices, all flooded. But I took out my phone, and it hadn't flooded, and I took this like selfie video, and I still have it, and I took it and I just videoed myself, and I said, okay, God, so this is what has happened, and you brought us here, and you called us to do this, and I know that you didn't call this children's home to be open for this period of time.
Just to flood.
We are all about generations at Heritage Ranch. What we do isn't about the one kid. Right. It's about his great-grandkids. It's about shifting generational cycles. And so I took the video and I said, okay, God, so now it's your job. You will restore this, and you're gonna prove to me that you're in control. And there's nothing like losing everything you have to make you realize you never had control you thought you had. It was just really like one of the most beautiful things, because in hindsight, I realized I hadn't given God the ranch. It was like, this is Vicki's children's home. Yeah. And in that moment, it was like, okay, God, I'm gonna give it to you because I don't have this to do again without you. And so that was August of 2016, 1 year and like 11 days after we had opened, and we had to start over. So I've started Heritage Ranch twice, and in Jesus' name, we'll never have to start it again, but we're back.
You've heard Vicki's story, and you know kids who are in crisis. You know families who don't know what to do to help their child. The way to help their child could be by helping Heritage Ranch. Go to lifeonpurpose.tv and help Heritage Ranch minister to kids in crisis.